Each and every day, enjoy the Simple Six menu at Subway, an entire made-for-you meal featuring one of six-inch sandwiches like the Italian BMT or Black Forest ham, with any bag of chips and a 21-ounce drink, all for only $6. Subway. Eat fresh.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
All right, this is part 2 of the JFK Assassination podcast. I am still joined by Chris Connelly. We chained him to a chair. He's not allowed to leave.
I am still here.
And now on the phone, a guy who wrote one of my favorite books of the last few years. Is it popular crime, right, or true crime? Popular crime?
Popular crime.
Yeah. Popular crime. Bill James, the godfather of basically all advanced stats. A legend, and somebody now who has a couple World Series rings with the Red Sox. But for these purposes, he wrote a big chapter in that book about the JFK assassination. So I could not resist having you on for this. And the first question is, this month there's just been a ton of shows that have been on. Have you been watching these shows, or do you feel like you cracked the conspiracy and you don't care anymore?
Oh, I've been watching all of them. At least I've been devoting 38 hours a day to watching them, but that only gets to about 40% of them. No, I've watched a few of the shows about the assassination, but as you say, there are so many of them that you can't keep up with.
Any new information in some of the more recent ones that has surprised you or changed your view of anything?
I honestly don't absolutely know what happened. There's one theory that makes more sense to me than any other. In terms of knowing what happened, I don't know. The Reels documentary, there's a TV channel called RELZ, and they did a documentary promoting the theory I am most persuaded by, which is the Howard Donahue theory that Kennedy was accidentally killed by a shot from a Secret Service agent. And that did contain some information that was new to me. For example, they claimed that when the House the House panel in the 1990s on the assassination asked the Secret Service to turn over all of their documents about the case, the Secret Service said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we just destroyed them last week." I don't know that that's true, but that's what the documentary said, and if it's true, it's another reason to believe that theory is credible.
Go ahead, Chris.
Bill, where were you when Kennedy was shot?
I actually was playing basketball. And this is a true story. I was playing a basketball game, and they called a timeout with about 8 minutes to go in the game in the middle of the afternoon, and we were like 4 points ahead, and they told us what had happened, and the other team wasn't told what has happened, and we lost the game.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
So were you home for the Oswald shooting or no?
That was on a Sunday, so I would have been at home, yeah. But, we didn't have a television, so I missed a lot of this stuff.
That's a problem. How has your perception of the assassination changed over the last 50 years?
I'll make an argument about it. The people like to use the assassination as a dividing line from which the 1960s depart. But I always argue, first of all, that that's not true, that it isn't a dividing line from which the 1960s really emerged. And second, if you believe that, you can't understand the 1960s. The late 1960s, which you have to be my age or older to remember, but there was nothing cynical or suspicious about it. It was a time of innocence personified. And the late 1960s, what we think of as the 60s, was an era of categorical trust. And you cannot get an era of categorical trust. It was foolish, but we were young. You cannot get an era of categorical trust springing from something which unsettles you. So it's just not true that the 60s really start with the Kennedy assassination. It's a false dividing line. Main point.
I don't think, Chris, you don't agree?
1968, Bill?
No, the 60s, the late 60s.
Well, when you say the late 60s, you mean 68 is a time of categorical trust?
Well, I think that's when it changed.
No,
right?
It changed.
68 was when the chickens came home to roost.
I see.
Yeah. I got it. Okay.
The Summer of Love, 66, it was 65 or 66 the Summer of Love. I'm getting old.
67 actually.
Right.
But
I
yeah,
don't think
same.
so.
And then the Summer of Love with the Red Sox too. It was a lot of love.
The Impossible Dream, actually. That was a reference to the Man of La Mancha. They weren't talking about Monterey Pop.
There's love everywhere.
Yes, there was, particularly with Dick Williams involved.
So was this something that when the assassination happened, because you're a guy who likes to think about this stuff, did you always think were you always cracking conspiracies and trying to figure it out, or was it something that happened later?
Well, I've always read crime books, and I've done so from a very early age. And I'm also rather skeptical. Most of the conspiracy theories, I don't mean to put, I'm sure you have guests on your show who are promoting some of them, and I don't mean to put them down, but they sound nutty to me. And most of the conspiracy theories have obvious reasons why they can't be true. When Howard Donahue and Bonar Menninger's book, Mortal Error, came out about 1991, I read it just because I read crime books. And I read it searching for why it couldn't be true, and I never could find it. I never could see why this theory couldn't be true. So I gradually began to argue that maybe it is true.
Why do you think for example, the belief of some people that the mafia had Kennedy killed, why were you able to dismiss that?
Well, again, I don't dismiss anything I don't know. There has to be evidence for it, and I think the evidence for it is really weak. It tends to proceed from the logic of motive, means, and opportunity. And motive, means, and opportunity is no way to solve any crime. Motive, means, and opportunity is something that prosecutors say when they don't actually have a case. There are tens of thousands of people every year who had motive, means, and opportunity to commit a crime, but who didn't actually commit it. So the arguments for that are based on the mafia had a strong motive to kill JFK. Well, for one thing, there's really, really, really good evidence that Oswald was in fact up there, and that he did in fact shoot at the president. And I think any theory which doesn't begin with that premise is suspect to me.
Why do you think that premise, though, is insufficient?
What premise?
Why do you think the premise that Oswald was shooting from the Texas School Book Depository?
No, I think he thinks that is.
But why isn't it a sufficient answer for why Kennedy died?
Because it's not theoretically impossible, but enormously for two reasons. Well, no, more reasons. First of all, it's enormously difficult to believe that Oswald could hit a moving target 3 times in 6 seconds with that weapon. There are people who have done that, but even the very, very best marksman with that weapon would have an extremely difficult time hitting a moving target 3 times in 6 seconds. It's sort of equivalent to my chance of hitting a home run off of Roger Clemens. It's not theoretically impossible if I swung blindly, but don't bet on it.
Well, Roger Clemens right now, or Roger Clemens in his prime?
But I haven't seen Roger for a couple of years, but I'm betting I still couldn't hit a home run off it. Anyway, that's one problem. Another problem is that the bullet which killed Kennedy did not act like a full metal jacket round. The bullet, what's called the magic bullet that went through Connelly and through the seat and through Kennedy, acted like a full metal jacket round. That's what a full metal jacket round does. It passes through and leaves a hole. The bullet that killed Kennedy acted like a frangible bullet. That is, a bullet that breaks up on impact. So that's another issue.
I actually brought this up in part 1 with Chris and Chuck Klosterman, who was on, and the only counter that we could come up with for why that could happen is the argument that just bullets in general act differently,
right?
And two bullets act the same.
That's a good argument,
right?
And not being a ballistics person, works for me.
I'm the same with you. I don't understand why that third bullet seemed like it just exploded. Right. Whereas the other ones just passed through the way you described. Anyway,
right.
Keep going.
And there's one more point. The Warren Commission argues that Kennedy's in order to trace the trajectory backward, the trajectory of the final bullet, the fatal bullet backward to the sixth floor, argues that Kennedy's head was tilted very, very sharply to the right and down, and it's just not true. I mean, you can look at the Zapruder film, and you can see that it is tilted down and to the right, and you can adjust for the fact that the street is also tilting a little bit. But the angle that is assigned to the tilt of Kennedy's head by the Warren's Commission is just not right. And whereas if you assume that Kennedy's head is at the angle that it really is, then it seems much more likely that the bullet comes from street level. In fact, I would offer you this challenge. If you watch the Zapruder film and ask the question, is this final bullet, is that coming from way up in the air, or is it coming from street level, you will conclude that it's coming from street level.
I agree with you, and I had never considered this theory until I read your book, which I loved. And you mentioned that Reels documentary, which Chris has not seen. I don't think a lot of people have seen it because it was on Reels. It's not exactly a marquee channel. It was a really interesting documentary, and a couple other points from it. Well, first of all, here's the theory. That there was the car behind Kennedy. It had Secret Service agents in it. You had a guy who had what was the name of the gun that he had? It was like a special.
Yeah, it's an AR-16.
Right. So he has it cocked and ready to go. Gunfire starts. He whirls around and accidentally fires a shot that ends up being the last shot that kills Kennedy. And as part of this documentary, this is when it got a little wonky. The night before, allegedly, all the Secret Service people were out on the town in the night in Dallas all night, partying, doing stuff, whatever. And then the next day, as we discussed earlier, Chris, it was super hot. They're hungover. Guy's a little rattled in general. Then this happens. He's a little hazy. He turns around and fires the shot. I mean, I wouldn't bet my life on it, but it's really interesting. And it certainly, if that was true, would add up a lot in my head, that a lot of the doubts that I have. What did I miss from that theory?
That was also new stuff to me, but you actually, I think, misstated that just a little bit. This documentary does talk a lot about the Secret Service members partying, which we know from recent events is a tradition of the service. But actually, they argue that Hickey was not. Well, their take is that Hickey was very inexperienced for the role that he went into, but because some of the other Secret Service men were hung over and not really in condition to work.
You're right. I screwed that up.
Hickey was assigned to a duty that was not normal for him, and that he actually had never done before.
You're right. I was watching that at 2:30 in the morning, so I missed the part.
Were you hungover?
Well, no, I missed the part where they said Hickey wasn't hungover. Sorry, George Hickey.
You know, Bill, what also comes to mind when you mention this theory is that this is a theory that's frequently been used to describe Robert Kennedy's death.
Oh, that it was somebody else who panicked and...
Yes, that it was a...
And also, I think Huey Long. I think there was a book published claiming that that's what happened to Huey Long. There was an effort made to assassinate him, and his own bodyguard killed him by mistake.
Yeah, I remember that, actually.
Well, all right, let's say this theory is true. Then are you 100% confident that the Zapruder film that we watch in 2013 is the same film that was filmed in 1963?
What else would it be?
Well, do you feel like it was edited or doctored in any way?
No, I know there's an argument being made now that he clicked it off and clicked it on, and that this distorts the timing. That is actually, I think in the Zapruder film, it appears to be 4.6 seconds between the first and last shot, which is totally impossible.
Right.
And there's an argument that he clicked it on and clicked it off. Well, my experience with cameras from that era was that they didn't go on and off that easily. I mean, a modern camera you can turn on and off that quickly, but the 1960s handheld camera didn't go on and off all that easily, and I doubt that that's true. But I'm not an expert, so I guess I should stay out of it.
There was people that saw they showed the Zapruder film before it became public to people, and people who had watched the original version said that the limo slowed almost to a stop before the last shot, and then that doesn't seem that way in the Zapruder film. I don't know. I've always wondered.
I've read my share, not as many as you, Bill. I've read my share of assassination books over the years. Mark Lane book, the Harold Weisberg book. Larry Schiller did a book at one point that tried to fight those things. The Gerald Posner book, Case Closed, and Hickey's name doesn't even appear in the index of these books.
Right.
Why after? Go ahead.
Well, the Posner book is outstanding, I think, and the Posner book explains. Posner book shoots holes in all of the theories, but it does not address the mortal error theory because I think it just wasn't out long enough. Between the time you send a book to a publisher and the time it gets published is normally about 14 to 16 months, and the mortal error was published about 16 months before the Posner book was published, and I think it just came out too late. The theory appeared too late for Posner to deal with.
Why do you think other conspiracy theorists, other people who studied the assassination, would not even have mentioned this possibility in their efforts to find an alternate reason for why Kennedy died?
There are so many theories that it's hard to pick through them and find what makes sense and what doesn't. And also, mortal error is almost impossible to read. I mean, it is very.
It's a condition of the genre, Bill, wouldn't you say? Of all, you've read a lot of great crime books, but this genre has produced more unreadable books. This particular crime has produced more unreadable books than any crime that I can think of. Even the Lindbergh assassination, even the Lindbergh kidnapping.
But mortal error is very technical, and they will talk about the angle from which the bullet was fired for 40 pages, and nobody can. I don't think anybody can understand this. I can't anyway, and it's the sort of stuff that I do, and I can't understand it. Right. But so a lot of the book is just not amenable to an easy discussion.
Right. In the Reels documentary, they made a big deal about the behavior in the autopsy room after Kennedy died, before his body got on the plane. And what'd you think of that part? Because I thought that was pretty eye-opening too.
Yeah, it is, but I don't know that it's all that suspicious. They seem to be saying that Texas law should have prevented Kennedy's body from being taken back to Washington. Well, this is the president, and when the president is assassinated and the new president says, "I want his body back to Washington," it's going back to Washington. And technicalities of the law be damned at that point. But there was something else about Lyndon Johnson I was going to try to force into the discussion.
Please.
Lyndon Johnson once did say to one of his biographers, I think Doris Kearns, that if I ever get shot, it's not going to be some lone sniper. It's going to be one of them trigger-happy Secret Service men. And he was fanatic about making sure that they didn't follow him too closely. So
that's interesting.
I'll throw that out.
Ooh, that's really interesting.
So he said that to Doris Kearns back when she was covering him in the later part of his presidency?
I wouldn't swear it was Doris Kearns. It could have been one of the other presidential historians.
Well, what are the behavior of the other people in that following car that would indicate that this had happened after?
Well, one of them said under oath, "I thought at first that Hickey had fired." One of them said in his testimony, "I thought at first that Hickey had fired a round." If you read that literally, what it means is later on I was forced to re-advise what I thought at first, but one of them snapped his head around and said, "Be careful with that thing." And he said later, "I thought he'd fired." So, that's another reason to believe this is a credible theory.
But that would indicate that they thought he had fired the first shot.
Or
why?
Well, there was mystery about what the first shot sounded like, right? There were people who said it was a backfire. There were people who thought it sounded like a backfire. People who thought it sounded like a firecracker. Right. To say be careful with that. To say be careful with that thing means essentially means, no other shots have been fired. You just fired something.
This was after all the shots.
Yeah, I think it was after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and also there was Chuck mentioned in part one about there's somebody on the 5th floor who said the way he heard the sound was like it was in rhythm, the 3 shots. But we were trying to figure out what happened to the shot that missed and which shot was it. What do you think about that?
I think the most credible theory is that it hit the ground beneath the limo or behind the limo.
And went where? Like just ricocheted underneath the limo and.
Do you think it hit the face of that guy who was standing under the triple underpass? Did it bounce off the curb and it hit the cheek of I forget his name, the cheek of the guy
James somebody, right?
Standing under the triple underpass?
I think it split apart when it hit the road, and but I don't know where the fragments flew. That's a theory, but again, you'd have to be a better ballistics person than I am.
Do you think it's the first shot or the second shot from Oswald?
First. No, the second shot.
Why do you think it's the second shot?
Why do I think what's the second shot?
Why do you think the shot that missed is the second shot?
Because Donahue says that, I think, and I'm just following here.
I think it's for me, it's more of a timing thing. It seems like in the rhythm of the 3 shots, it does seem like there's a space between the first shot and the third shot.
It changes.
And there are also numerous witnesses. Well, here's 2 more things in favor of this theory. There are numerous witnesses who say that the sound of the final shot was different than the sound of the other shot. But another thing is that many people smell gunpowder at street level. People who had been around firearms all their lives said, I smelled gunpowder at street level. Well, there's no way in the world, if the only shots fired were fired from the 6th floor repository, that you're going to smell gunpowder a second later at street level. It's just not going to happen.
That is weird. I've always had problems with that because it wasn't like just one person that said it. It was at least a dozen, right? Mentioned.
That's right. One of whom was Cale Yarborough, who was a senator from Texas, who was in a car, 2 cars behind Kennedy, and who was a lifelong hunter. He'd been around weapons all his life.
For many years, that particular testimony was combined with the puff of smoke idea. The idea that there was a puff of smoke that could be seen from behind the fence at the grassy knoll, and those 2 ideas were combined. But I guess guns even at that time didn't tend to emit puffs of smoke after they were fired.
There's a little vapor that will distort your vision if you're close to it. So there is some little puff there, but unless the president was assassinated with a blunderbuss, you really don't get a puff of smoke.
So you love probabilities and trying to figure out the likelihood of this scenario happening or this one. Like, it's one of the great things about baseball. Like, guy in third, 1 out. Like, if you do this, that you have a possibility of this happening or this or this. So if you had to guess probability percentages for all of the Kennedy conspiracy theories, what would the George Hickey possibility be compared to if it was just out of 100%, what would it be?
55%.
55%.
Right.
What about Oswald just acting alone? What would you give for that?
Well, I think Oswald did act alone, but that there was another. He wasn't acting in concert. But I'm 100% convinced that Oswald fired.
Well, I'm saying if just Oswald, that's it. Only bullets came from his gun. He's the one who killed JFK and Chuck Connelly, and that's it. We're done.
Well, but 40% or thereabouts. And there is some chance that he was acting on the instigation, that he was manipulated into this by mobsters. I don't see the evidence for it, but I don't think you can disprove it.
Bill, as someone who read so many true crime books and so read all of these kind of conspiracy books that started with Mark Lane and Harold Weisberg and sort of continued on, as difficult as they were to read, what struck you about the changes in the way they perceived the assassination over 10, 20, 30 years? How did some of the explanations or the ideas of conspiracy transform in that time, from what you could tell?
Well, I didn't read all of them. There are like 300 books about the Kennedy assassination. I haven't read anywhere near all of them. I've read a lot of them. There's a difference between the publishing industry in the 1960s and the publishing industry in the 1990s. in the 1960s, the publishing industry was an oligarchy, and you really couldn't get something published by a reputable publisher. It was hard to get something totally nutty published by a reputable publisher. By the 1990s, the publishing industry had fractured to such an extent that people were publishing books claiming that Errol Flynn was secretly Batman and all kinds of stuff. And the same thing happens in the assassination industry. It starts out with Mark Lane making arguments that are probably not true, but not totally outlandish. And over time, it just gets more and more outlandish, I think.
How do you think? Go ahead.
Anything becomes evident. If you get far enough away from the event, anything becomes possible evidence. So much has happened since then. I mean, among the worst things is the theory that all of the people surrounding the mysterious deaths surrounding the assassination. Some Secret Serviceman dies of cancer 30 years after the fact, and they say, here's another suspicious death linked to the Kennedy assassination.
And Posner does a great job blowing that up in his book as well. How about that David Lifson book, the one that alleged that the body had been swapped out from the plane?
Isn't that crazy?
That was a published book, as you were saying, Bill. I think that got a real hearing.
Right.
It was based on the change of caskets, right? That the idea that the plane had been loaded on, the body had been loaded on the plane, and then that was taken off and replaced with something.
I asked.
Right, and there was plastic surgery involved, lots of plastic surgery involved to make some other corpse look like the president, which of course is totally impossible, but it was a popular theory.
I asked Chris this, and I'm going to ask you. When I was growing up, I was always under the impression we were going to find out more at a certain date, and it was always like, well, at the 50-year anniversary, or after a certain amount of time, more stuff will come out. We'll learn more about what happened. And now it feels like 50 years later, we've learned all about all that we're going to learn for the most part. Do you feel disappointed at all that we didn't get like this one last wave of info that could have clarified some of this?
Yes, but I do think we're probably beyond clarity. I think we have a better chance of figuring out who killed Napoleon than we do who killed Kennedy.
What do you make of Jack Ruby, Bill?
My belief is that he most likely was a deluded simpleton who thought that he would be a hero by killing Oswald. Another thing that I learned from one of these many documentaries is that when Oswald was first arrested at the movie theater, people tried to storm the car. There was a mob of people that tried to, when Oswald was dragged out of the movie theater, a mob of people tried to storm the car. I think that's instructive because it tells us that it wasn't just Ruby who wanted to kill this priest who killed the president. I mean, it was a not uncommon sentiment. That mob justice mentality. I think he was an expression of a mob justice mentality.
For me, the craziest thing about watching these documentaries is that Oswald was interrogated for 12 hours. Nobody taped it. The Dallas Police Department didn't own a tape recorder, and nobody took any kind of comprehensive notes of any kind.
Right.
And then the cops, this is the really incredible part, the cops brought him out for a press conference.
Right.
They put him in front of the press and said, go right ahead.
Like he was John Farrell.
It's incredible.
I think you should use a losing manager in that situation.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, the only real recorded record of the interrogation of Oswald is that for part of it they brought a reporter into the room, and the reporter took notes. Do you remember that?
Right.
Like I think his name was Lester. It's extending the Red Sox analogy,
Right.
But again, that was not an uncommon practice. In 1915, when you were arrested for a serious crime, the police would talk to you for a couple hours, and then they'd turn you over to the reporters. By 1963, practice was pretty much passé, but in this case, it was still done.
Is there any other aspect of this that we didn't mention that you wanted to mention?
I'm good.
Last question for me then. When did your book come out? Was it 3 years ago or 4 years ago? 3 years ago?
Must have been 3 years ago, I think.
So has there been a crime in the last 3 years that made you say, ooh, possible epilogue here. I might have to bring the book back and tackle this.
I don't know. There are some interesting crimes all the time. I'm really interested. The guy who was executed yesterday in Missouri, Joseph Franklin. That's a really interesting crime story. One thing I said in the book is that serial murderers never have a reason why they're killing. In fiction, serial murderers are always killing people for some reason, but in real life, they have a reason. They just like killing people. But Joseph Franklin was that super organized serial murderer who actually went around killing people based on a theory and for a reason. So that's a very interesting story.
It sounds like, listen, you always have a door open at Grantland. If you ever get fascinated by a crime story and you want to write about it, we're here for you. Just so you know.
Great, thanks.
We're always here, just so you don't have to re-release the book and do epilogues. It's a pain in the ass to re-release books.
He'll make more money if there's an epilogue.
Well, I didn't want to
give the guy a break.
Spoil this for me, Chris. I'm giving him the open door. Bill James, congrats on everything, and I hope you enjoy the winter. Congrats on the 2013 title. You were involved with the Red Sox. Thanks for helping make my favorite team fun again, and thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Talk to you later. Bye.
All right, before we get to JackO, first, a word from our good friends at Subway.
Subway's breaking new ground at breakfast. Now you can kickstart your day with spicy sriracha sauce, our boldest flavor yet. Try it on any of your favorite breakfast sandwiches, like a fresh toasted bacon, egg white, and cheese. Subway, be bold, eat fresh.
All right, last but not least, my old college roommate, a BS Report Hall of Famer. I saw your tweet yesterday, JackO.
What's that?
You were mad yesterday. I called Steve Kerr a BS Report Hall of Famer, and
that's right. I felt snubbed.
You didn't have your induction. We left you out.
Is it now a first ballot thing? Maybe is that the next echelon? Who was a first ballot Hall of Famer?
That's Chris Connelly. He's another Hall of Famer in the BS Report. We should have a BS Report Hall of Fame. That'd be fun. I feel like somebody's feelings would get hurt though.
Well, then we would just say, well, I was a first ballot. Well,
yeah,
all those guys who don't think anyone should get in on the first ballot, they voted against me. But yeah.
So we had Chuck for an hour. We just had Bill James for 35 minutes, and we're wrapping things up with you, JackO, because you and I once upon a time spent a lot of time discussing the JFK assassination. And
it's true, yes.
And I couldn't remember if we had done this on a podcast before, and we both felt like we hadn't. I certainly don't remember doing it. But are you watching the shows, or have you moved on in your life?
No, I've watched some shows. I watched Killing Kennedy on National Geographic. No, I think it was this weekend. They got in the game early. They played it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I watched
Rob
that
Lowe
one.
as JFK.
Rob Lowe, not an awful JFK, I gotta say.
No,
he's an excellent choice. Let's face it.
He was good.
He's the guy. He's terrific.
I liked how they gave him the JFK wig too. It kind of changed his face.
The accent's always the hardest thing because you could really just mangle that and be a laughing stock forever. And he did an adequate job, I think.
Yeah, because the tendency is just to go totally off the car.
Hey, right. You go over the top, and there's like Phil Hartman doing, Kennedy's Ted Kennedy on Saturday Night Live or something, which was meant to be a parody. So we want to avoid that when possible.
I think you and I even saw JFK in the theater in Worcester.
I think we did.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we went out somewhere and had a crappy dinner and talked conspiracy theories for 2 hours. Where do you land? What's your theory?
I think it was Oswald acting by himself.
Oh.
I read something on Twitter the other day where it said basically in America when it comes to the JFK conspiracy, I think it was actually Ace of Spades on Twitter who said that everybody is either a conspiracy theorist or a recovering conspiracy theorist. And I would label myself as a recovering conspiracy theorist.
For everything or just for JFK?
No, well, just for JFK. Just for purposes of this podcast, let's say just for JFK.
All right, what about for A-Rod?
I still believe all three Red Sox World Series titles this decade were the result of vast conspiracies. But
yeah, I know. Listen. I took your Big Papi tweets during the 2013 playoff run very, very personally. Because it's a lot of damage between. We're gonna have to rebuild. We have some healing to do, JackO.
Absolutely. All I have left is my bitterness. Let me have that at least.
It's funny though. We've talked for a while now, and a lot of people are we haven't come across a full-fledged conspiracy theorist. Nobody. I think if we'd had this conversation 20 years ago,
Oh, I agree.
Everybody would have been saying it was the CIA. Everybody knows there was unseen forces. They didn't like what he was doing. It was because of what happened with the Bay of Pigs or the fact that he was dating the mobster's mistress or whatever.
Right.
And we're not there anymore.
I think the 9/11 truther thing kind of sobered people up on conspiracies a little bit, made you feel, kind of take a step back, be like, oh, well, this is ridiculous, so maybe some of this other stuff's ridiculous too. But I will say, though, the one thing I think that's changed the most for me since college, I remember leaving JFK and really feeling like Stone cracked it. Like we left like, yeah, what a great thing. And then as the years pass, it becomes more and more ridiculous. And now if I'm flicking channels and I see that movie, I just feel like it's a ludicrous, ridiculous movie, this crazy Oliver Stone theory that somehow he convinced 20 actors to be in. And and it's just kind of amazing that it happened. It really is. It's like my joking theory about Michael Jordan getting suspended for gambling. It's almost like if I had put on a movie about this and gotten Denzel Washington to be in it and all these real actors. And then 20 years later, people. Oh, good.
And he convinced Kevin Bacon to be painted gold with a dog collar or something. Wasn't there that scene?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it is still. I mean, my memory of it, I wasn't buying it, but it was a spectacular thing to see.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the cinematography and the editing was.
It was kind of him at the top of his game.
Kind of spectacular to watch. Yeah.
And great actors, big time actors.
Yeah, Tommy Lee was extraordinary. I mean, Tommy, whether or not you believed anything that was going on, Tommy Lee as Clay Shaw was, really, really set the bar high there.
And let's be honest, Costner probably had the championship belt in 1991 or whenever that movie came out.
Absolutely.
He was the biggest movie star.
Oh, yeah.
So when he was in that movie, it was like, oh, this is a real thing. Kevin Costner's in it. Stamp of approval. Three years later, he's in Waterworld.
Well, which was a big thing at the time. It just didn't work out quite right. It would be like if you decided to make a movie with JackO. That would be the thing that happened. Costner having enjoyed all the success,
right? Said,
my old friend Kevin Reynolds,
I'm going to hook him up.
We're gonna do it together. It's going to be great, And when you sometimes when you reach into the past,
right?
In your new reality, it's not a happy marriage.
JackO. I'm gonna abandoning our Lethal Weapon idea. JackO and I are gonna bring back Lethal Weapon.
A buddy
did it
movie?
Go anywhere? Did Lethal Weapon go? How many movies are there with two mismatched guys yelling?
Buddy cops.
Well, the problem is that one of them is always wearing a Lycra suit now. All those guys have gone away. It's like the cheesiest guy who was ever in a comic book is a bigger deal than Riggs and and Gibson were in that.
I did Alex Papademos and Wesley Morris's podcast yesterday in this very studio, and we were looking at the 48 hours picture that's right behind you. I was saying how angry it made me that there were only 2 48 hours, and yet there was 5 Lethal Weapons.
You ever imagine
7 diehards?
You ever imagine how big Eddie Murphy would have been for the third?
Could have gained weight. Yeah, every 48 hours he would have been 20 pounds heavier. That would have been my gimmick. By the 5th one, he would have been in a fat suit. But it really, they gave the Lethal Weapon franchise to Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. It should have been Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. I blame both of them.
Those guys were spectacular.
Shame on them.
Well, Walter Hill was like a hot stuff guy back then too. Walter Hill was really, a director, and particularly like all the Pauline Kael guys really liked him. Schrago was a big fan of Walter Hill, I remember.
So, JackO, you are a recovering conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
You believe Oswald acted alone.
I do.
And I don't know. This is.
I think. Look,
JackO, I knew.
Conspiracy theory. If it was a conspiracy theory, if it really was a conspiracy, it makes it a much more interesting story, and all the plots and who did it, what to whom, and who did that. But and it also imbues JFK's death with it makes it a grander spectacle, if that could be said, because you don't want to think that the president of the United States, this young, seemingly vibrant guy, the most powerful guy in the world, is killed by this communist loser who's basically underemployed, a wife beater that's a complete loser and is semi-deranged. You don't want it to be just like this guy, like just a random act of murder, basically by a sociopath. You want it to be this grander episode that Shakespearean tragedy type thing, and it just doesn't. That's why people want to believe in conspiracies, I believe, but to believe in it after 50 years where nobody's come forward with any kind of tangible evidence, and you have to believe in a hyper-competent cabal or a hyper-competent government that can pull this off. get away with it for 50 years and probably engage in countless murders of people that thought too much or do too much and come away with their hands completely clean. I just don't think it would happen.
So almost like the cabal that set up David Ortiz in 2003?
Exactly. But see, that leaked out, too. They couldn't even keep that quiet.
What leaked out? I'm still want to know what leaked out. He's on some list of people that allegedly took performance
The New York
enhancers.
Times got a hold of some list that he was on.
Right.
For players who they did this testing system, which the players agreed to on the condition that it would never be released.
Right.
Although I never quite understood what the purpose of taking this test was, just to sort of like do a poll of how many kids.
No, the test was there was a certain threshold, right? They were testing to see, because of it, the union and Major League Baseball agreed that if it was over a certain threshold, they would be allowed to test at a higher level. So everybody had warning. Everybody knew it was all going to be happening, and it still crossed the threshold.
But part of it,
if I remember correctly.
Wasn't it like,
if I remember,
you could end up on that list for anything, though? Like if I took too much Sudafed, I would have failed whatever test it was.
Well, it was all things that were steroid related, though. Like when Manny got caught, it was because he was taking some drug that they give to lactating women, but it also it also covers up steroids. So it's just like in the Olympics, when you get caught for Sudafed or something, it's because it's used as a masking agent for other things that it covers up in your urine somehow. I don't understand the chemistry, but
well, let's say
Ortiz and his defenders have clung to, well, he was caught with some substance, but it just could have been, his creatine over the counter, completely legal, was laced with something, or it was Sudafed, or it was, too much NyQuil. But that's never been proven. Just that all that's known is he was tested for something.
But let's say he was taking like creatine or one of those type of things that you could buy over the counter that was totally legal in 2003 because baseball didn't test for that stuff. And then they passed all the rules, and he stopped taking any of that stuff since, and he's passed every test. So why can't he be innocent? How did he break the law? How did he break your code, John O'Connell?
Well, A-Rod's passed every single test since then, too. And he's on trial for his baseball career.
A-Rod was in a massive biogenesis scandal.
Exactly, but he passed every test. They have him on. They found him out because of Anthony Bosch, and he ratted everybody out, and he had these blatant records where it basically had like A-Rod's baseball card stapled to a check for it said 4 steroids in the memo line, but he's passed all the tests just like Ortiz has.
And here is where all of our love of conspiracy theories have gone, because we all really feel like it's an iceberg situation. We all feel that the people who have been specifically identified as using this stuff, count for 1/6, 1/7, 1/8 of the people who actually took it. And we are convinced that people who have never been specifically mentioned took it, and they will not get elected to the Hall of Fame because in our hearts, we feel like they must have been dirty somehow.
I love how you brought this full circle, Chris Connelly.
You're darn right, Bill Simmons.
You're right. We spend more time conspiracy theorizing about sports than we do with all this JFK and all this other stuff now. I spend more time in private conversations with people guessing who's cheating and who's not cheating.
Well, and what are we going to do about it? What do you do about Jeff Bagwell? What do you do about Mike Piazza? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I thought Piazza's I read through his book. I didn't buy his book, but I might have been in a Barnes & Noble as my kids were in the kids department reading the Mike Piazza book.
And they ask why Barnes & Noble's going out of business.
Yeah, pretending to watch them. Wait, where are my kids?
Hey, get over here.
Hey, wait.
Hey.
Where'd they go?
Hey, Mike McGillicuddy, steam shovel.
I was engrossed in this Mike Piazza book. But he said something about, he was like, I never took whatever. But what I did do is I bought this stuff. It was totally legal. It was basically that creatine thing that had the stuff in it.
Yep.
Nobody ever told me it was illegal. Nobody ever told me it was terrible for me, and I just took it, and it was part of my workout routine. It made me stronger. I felt good. And then he said as time went on and stuff became illegal, then he stopped doing it.
But you have a belief system now among the people who vote for the Hall of Fame that that's not the case. Whether or not it's true, based on nothing. It's a belief.
It's a witch hunt is what it is.
Well, it's almost like it doesn't even without the hunting part. It's just the people who will cast the votes for the Hall of Fame feel in their hearts that all these guys who are eligible committed this unpardonable sin and they won't get voted for, whether or not there's any evidence.
I mean, the dumbest thing, though, is that for baseball, is if they really wanted to clean up the era and really put the past behind them, they would open everything up and put everybody out there that was ever identified and failed any test. Because for now, you have guys like Clemens and Pettit, et cetera, who were in the who got steroids through some connection of McNamee, who was the only source for the Mitchell report. So those guys are tainted forever and outed as steroid users, but plenty of guys who didn't get their steroids from the Mets clubhouse guy that bought them in Mexico or in the Dominican Republic or in drugstores or from any other source or from shady weightlifters or whatever, those guys are completely scot-free.
Yeah.
So you can't have a fair vote on the Hall of Fame where guys that bought steroids from one source and got outed in one report are forever tainted, when everybody knows there's a large plurality of guys that use steroids and they're never tainted because they didn't buy them from that one source. You can't have an investigation where it's only one based on one source and one location, I think.
And we've talked about this before, you and I, on the podcast.
Yeah. You said it, and you had a column, I think, once where you said in this Hall of Fame, if the guys have the numbers to get in the Hall of Fame, you should put them in the Hall of Fame.
Put it on the plaque.
Have a special wing where guys, the Hall of Fame guys that played from 1985 through the World Series of 2013, especially, and point out that they played during this era and take the numbers and take their Hall of Fame credentials for what they are.
Just put it on the plaque. It's a museum.
Yeah.
It's not the center of the moral universe. It's a museum that, I want to take my kids to someday, and they learn about what happened in baseball. And it's like, oh, yeah, once upon a time, black guys couldn't play in baseball, and they were over here, and they called it the Negro Leagues. And over here is where there was this era where everybody cheated. And this guy cheated and that guy cheated, but look at those stats that he did. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be.
There are also moments when I think, can you imagine if athletes voted for the Sports Journalist Hall of Fame?
Oh, God. That would be insane.
I mean, isn't it on some level?
Ahmad Rashad would be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Isn't it a little unusual that writers instead of players vote?
I hate it. It's one of the most antiquated things about sports media right now. It's ridiculous in a lot of ways. The other thing that kills me is when they do the thing where nobody gets in on the first ballot. Not on my watch.
Yeah.
Tom Seaver, you're not good enough this time. You'll have to wait, mister.
Right, because the first year Ruth didn't get in on the first ballot.
Babe Ruth didn't get in. You're not getting in.
Nobody ever can. Right, or didn't get a unanimous vote.
Greg Maddux isn't going to get in on his first ballot. No, sorry, Greg Maddux.
There's a logjam. I mean, they're like Buster Olney did a great column. He's like, there are 12 guys you could vote for.
Does anybody care anymore, though? Like, seriously, do you really honestly care about I feel like they've ruined the Baseball Hall of Fame.
They care.
I know they care, but
they care.
I used to love the Hall of Fame. I would care. I would get upset. I would look at the entry. Now it's like, whatever. You guys screwed this place up.
I can't say I don't care. The guys I like, I still want them to get in.
Is there somebody who hasn't gotten in that you want in?
I don't know how to, I don't know. Piazza's a real crisis for me. I don't know what to think. He was a thrilling player, because the challenge of the whole thing, of course, is that you had a lot of great players who topped off by taking steroids, who topped off great careers and extended them. But there are a lot of those guys who took those things who would have done anything just to get better. Max effort guys who took them, and those were the guys you always rooted for, who played to the limit of their ability and then beyond. And how could you fault them for thinking, gosh, if I just do this, then it will finally work? And we have more sympathy for them typically.
And they're also competitive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money at stake.
Sure.
They feel like other people are doing it.
I've always thought that some player, like a guy like McGuire should have said, of course I took steroids. I did a lot of things that nobody should do because I was a performer. And like I say, if I don't get to enjoy a group of people performing on performance-enhancing drugs, I'm going to have to stop listening to Some Girls by the Rolling Stones.
It's a great point. Music from, 1965 through today.
Layla, forget about it.
Yeah. Lou Reed.
Sure.
Just about everything.
Yeah.
McGuire's emerged as something of, like a redemption story in this whole thing.
He's a batting coach for the Dodgers, right?
Yeah, I feel like he's like a weird, tragic figure. Like, I feel bad when I see him. I feel like he came clean. He genuinely felt bad about it, it seemed like. And it made me wonder why other guys wouldn't have done that.
Well, that's why. I mean, if we had maybe now that will change things, because he was the guy who kept anybody from ever speaking again, because he, in his tangled way, tried to tell the truth, and he was, we ran him,
Right.
Yeah, we ran him.
So, Johnny, you tell Jeter it's time. It's time for him to come clean.
Blasphemer.
Hey, come on.
I mean, a lot of that.
The man is running a publishing house now. We have to show a little respect. We have to get our book proposals together to submit to Derek.
Johnny, in all seriousness about David Ortiz, his body hasn't changed from 2002 to now.
It's certainly not true for me, I'll tell you that much.
Looks the same. It's not like a Bonds thing where his head grew in size. He looks the same.
3 years
big
ago,
stocky Dominican guy.
3 years ago, they were trying to decide whether to designate him for assignment or just bench him or
he was
send him
hurt.
to Tuck-it.
He had a bad wrist.
He was hurt.
He had a bad wrist. He had a bum
and
wrist.
The guy comes back at age 38 and hits 800 in the freaking World Series.
It's a 5-game sample size.
He couldn't turn on fastballs. He was released by the Minnesota Twins.
No,
when he
not
was
true.
Oscar Arias, he was 180 pounds.
Not released. He was not released. They chose somebody else over him. His contract was up. He was a free agent. The Red Sox signed him as a free agent.
Okay, they chose somebody else over him because he didn't hit anything remotely close to what he hits like now.
I feel like Sam Cooke sitting ringside for Liston Clay won.
At age 38. At age 38, at least 38, because there's questions about his age. At age 38, and I called him Oscar Arias before. He was David Arias, and then he somehow became David Ortiz.
Right.
Anybody that doesn't have some serious questions about that isn't looking.
Should you have serious questions about him going 2 for 25 in the ALCS? What about that?
And 1-2 was a grand slam that turned the whole thing around.
Right. But then he slumped that whole series. Then he got hot for 5 games. Then they pitched around him in Game 6.
Cycles, obviously. I don't understand all the ins and outs of how steroids work, just that they work.
I think
I'm not a doctor.
We should do a 5-hour David Ortiz argument podcast. The most interesting thing to me is these guys who played, especially in football, who now show up on certain television networks, who now are no longer giant people like they were when they played. And we're all like, oh, hey, there he is. And they are just a lot skinnier and they look different than they did. And it's really hard for me to believe that this stuff just doesn't go on all the way through. And I include basketball. Like, watch basketball on ESPN Classic when Magic and Bird played. These dudes didn't have muscle back then. That you can't tell me that all of a sudden they're lifting weights and all of a sudden now everybody is just stacked.
Well, I mean, I remember talking to Mark Johnson, maybe my favorite hockey player of all time.
Oh yeah,
the hero of the 1980 Olympic team. Mark Johnson
and a Hartford Whaler.
Yeah. Mark Johnson had the body of a 15-year-old.
Right.
Mark Johnson looked like he was 15. He was like 5'8" and 150, and you just think, really?
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did that happen? What if we tried to play now?
The Dr. J book came out. I was looking through the pictures of that, and Dr. J was just a skinny dude who can jump, and that's who played basketball in the 70s and 80s. And now it's changed a little bit, and people.
Now LeBron looks like a tight end or like a linebacker.
A lot of these
this is the interesting thing. You talk about what the future of football is going to be. We're all talking about with the concussions and stuff who will go and play football, and
right.
It's in the same situation that the heavyweight boxing division is in now. It's like when you look at who would have been a champion boxer, they all are playing first base or they're linebackers or they're tight ends. So there are going to be other places for those guys to go. The guys who are tight ends and linebackers are all going to want to bat cleanup or play power forward.
I have a good theory about this, actually, because I've been thinking about it a lot because I've been going to these soccer games for my daughter. I know JackO coaches his daughter's soccer team.
Yes.
I think more and more people are drifting away from football in my parent demo. Think about like when I was a kid, if you had a chance to play football, if you were good enough to play quarterback, running back, whatever, like, oh, that would be awesome. Of course I want to be a quarterback. Quarterbacks get the girls. Quarterbacks are popular. I want to be a quarterback. Now it's like, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I don't know if I'd want my son to be a quarterback or a safety or one of these things. Like, I'd feel like so let's say he got a concussion when he was 14 playing 9th grade football.
How would you feel about yourself?
That's kind of on me, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like more and more people are drifting towards soccer and lacrosse and sports like this, which brings me full circle. The World Cup's coming up. I think in about 10 years, I think we're going to start kicking ass in the World Cup. I think some of our best athletes now are going to be gravitating toward these other sports.
But I think that our best soccer athletes all became basketball players. Like, I think you were the guy who said Allen Iverson would be Leo Messi if he had played soccer.
Right, but I think a lot of those other athletes were playing football, and they were playing
the football guys would go to
wide receiver, safety, quarterback. And now, what if some of those people drift toward soccer? Could get interesting. All we need is like 5. And I think the women's soccer is going to be loaded. JackO, have you had a meltdown yet in a ref?
No, I'm super calm. No, it's 9-7-year-olds, and all they do is just congregate around the ball. So no.
First of all, you're not super calm. I've known you for 25 years. Super calm is not a word I would use for you.
Well, Super Cobb might be strong, but the refs are all teenagers. So, no, I was good. I was like John Wooden out there. I was quiet authority.
You know, that teenage ref in Brazil. We know what happened to the teenage ref in Brazil.
That's right.
Let's be careful out there. Insane.
Well, Johnny, there's a world after this level you're in now when the refs become adults, and it feels a lot better to yell at them.
Then I'm Dennis Hopper and Hoosiers. There's no question. But, for now, I'm John Wooden.
I remember when Snoop Dogg was the offensive coordinator for his for Spank's team, and Spank I think was 9, and Snoop Dogg said he had watched tape of the other team.
I know, but couldn't remember it because he was so stoned.
He had studied their defensive tendencies. Have you figured out like what formations the other Mighty Mites are playing? Will you be exploiting the kid who stubbed his toe at recess at left back?
Well, see, we have a rule in our league that every kid has to play. So on our team of 9 girls, there's like 5 kids that are great, and 2 that are mediocre, and 2 that are terrible. That don't know their right from their left. They can barely stand up.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I was trying to hide the 2 kids that couldn't stand up on defense, and that presented some problems.
Yeah, I can't.
And then I figured out you can't have one awful kid. You can have one awful kid back on defense, but you have to have one competent kid with her.
Yep.
And that was the key to our 5-game winning streak. Once I figured that out. Plus, we have a girl that's like Pele. She would score like 3 or 4 goals a game. So the key was just get her the ball, get out of her way. You are perfectly describing everything I remember about sports as a kid.
Yeah.
It's like get on the team with the one great player.
Got to do it.
And then try to be the first to hug him after he scores a goal, hits a home run, strikes out the side.
That's like when Jacoby and I go to USC to play basketball, we know who all the best players are. We just attach ourselves to them because that's what you got to do. You got to ride the coattails.
Right.
JackO, the next level when goalies get involved and adult referees, I might have to fly cross country to bail you out of prison. So it gets intense. I don't know how we got here from the JFK assassination, but
smile,
we did. I knew it was going to end in youth soccer. I just had a feeling. I would have wanted it that way.
That's where all conspiracies lead. It all ends up at youth soccer.
Well, there are more conspiracies in World Cup sports than there are in World Cup soccer.
FIFA.
That's right.
Like who had the Qatar, Russia? Did that guy really have a nervous breakdown before the World Cup final?
It sounds like you should host a podcast called Conspiracy Theories. You and Chuck should just be on here on Grantland Network all the time.
Sports conspiracies.
Sports conspiracy could be all kinds of conspiracies.
You cover a lot of ground with those. How about you could just do the gold medal game in 72 over and over and over again. That could go forever.
I'm actually of the incompetence. I'm in the incompetence category for that one. I just think it was a mess. I don't even think there was malice behind it. I just think it was really poorly run and just a debacle on all accounts.
An absence of authority in a key moment. That was what it was.
I do TV now with Doug Collins.
Greatest 2 foul shots in history.
That's what I said to him. Yeah. And what's crazy, I guess not crazy, it's been 41 years. He's still in pain. He's still mad about it.
They never picked up the silver medal, right?
It's not eased up one iota about the 72 game.
Wouldn't that be amazing, though? What if you called those guys and said, listen, a couple of guys would like their silver medals. How do you feel?
We did that, remember? We did a 30 for 30 short where they voted. They vote every year.
Did they really? Okay.
They vote every year.
Like the 72 Dolphins.
Yeah. They vote every year, and every year they vote not to take the medals, and one guy has it in his will that none of his descendants at any point in life can ever accept the medal. And that's it. It's just in a safe deposit box forever. So, yeah, some hard feelings.
Okay.
And speaking of
I hope that my snouting from the BS Report Hall of Fame doesn't come to that, but I have to leave it in my will to never accept induction.
I'm going to have to sketch this out. There's some hurt feelings. Some hurt feelings about when you did the Facebook post with the steroids, with each sentence begin with a word and it spelled out steroids in a big puzzle. I was hurt. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I felt like you were deliberately trying to hurt me.
The one thing you have to say for the Baseball Hall of Fame is that to get in it, you don't have to wear a yellow jacket.
Good point.
I would have drawn the line there. It's like
JackO, recovering conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
Welcome back to the BS Report after your month suspension for all the Ortiz jokes. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk about the past. Let's move forward.
Let's move forward. Thank you for coming on. Chuck Klosterman, thanks for coming on. Bill James, thanks for coming on. Chris Connelly, thanks for co-hosting. This was fun. We got to figure out other subjects to co-host on. Maybe we'll do
pleasure.
I want to do something about 1994.
It would be a lot of fun. This was a great time. Okay.
A really fascinating year for a variety of reasons. I don't want to spoil
everything crazy that happened in 94.
We'll have to flesh it out. All right. Talk to you soon.
Target percent off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at PodCenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
Hey, what you got there, Golick?
The new Subway Chipotle chicken melt with guacamole.
Man, that looks good.
Yeah, this new guac is really bringing the flavor.
Got one for me too, right?
Well, yes and no. Mostly no. Well, really, all no.
Try the irresistible new Subway Chipotle chicken melt with guacamole, juicy grilled chicken strips with Monterey cheddar, Chipotle Southwest sauce, and new guacamole made from ripe Hass avocados with just a hint of jalapeno. Subway, eat fresh.